Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review comes from 1970, and it's The Man Who Had Power Over Women, directed by John Krish, starring Rod Taylor, Carol White, Charles Corvin, Keith Barron, Clive Francis, based on a novel. It does have a terrible title, because The Man Who Had Power Over Women sounds like some sex comedy about hypnosis or something, but the title's fairly random. This is by number 209. This is one of Indicator's January releases. And as usual, you get a lovely booklet. Yes, there are women in the film, and essays and such. And there is reversible artwork. This is a Region A and B release. It also stars Valerie Leon. We all love Valerie Leon, and this is her body here. But as typical with Valerie Leon's career, she's only in it for one scene, and her body is the main focus of that scene. Which is rather unfortunate. Valerie Leon should have had bigger parts in her career, but didn't, because she already had two big parts. This forms a wonderful double bill with Peter Watkins' Privilege. Now, Privilege is a masterpiece. The Man Who Had Power Over Women isn't, but it's still a fascinating film. It's 1970, so there's things in it that you couldn't get away with nowadays. And whereas Privilege is kind of from the singer's point of view and the view of the business, this is really about Rod Taylor and the breakup of his marriage. Rod Taylor is a manager in the music business, and he were focused in his agency and his handling of Clive Francis, who's a singer called Barry, who gives one of the greatest performances as an absolute slime ball, obsessed with himself, sees his female fans as just pieces of meat to have sex with, and along with the kind of breakup of Rod Taylor's marriage, the other kind of through line of the plot is Clive Francis knocking up one of his 17-year-old fans, and then the company paying for a backstreet abortion, basically, and Rod Taylor finally kind of standing up for, I wouldn't say his morals, because his morals are a bit all over the place in the film, but taking a stand at one point. Now again, this film is a bit rough around the edges, but it is also kind of fascinating. You could argue Rod Taylor's a bit miscast, but he does give an interesting performance. So his wife has kind of got a rich father, played by the wonderful Philip Stone, who we all remember from some Kubrick films, Clockwork Orange and The Shining, amongst all the other films he did. And she leaves him. He's very depressed and angry, and he goes to stay with his best pal, who's kind of a speech writer for the celebrities, and writes the gags for Clive Francis to do at charity events and things like that, which sometimes works and sometimes don't work when Clive Francis ad-libs. But he has a thing, or develops a thing for his pal's wife, played by Carol White, who I wasn't actually that familiar with, but then you actually look at her credits, and she was Kathy in the famous play for today, Kathy Come Home, which caused so much furore in Britain. She was also in Poor Cow, and she's, again, if you look at her credits, she was in a ton of stuff, but doesn't have a name that kind of jumps out at you. And she's brilliant as, again, the wife of his pal, who obviously has feelings for Rod Taylor and sees the kind of self-destructive path that he's on after the breakup of his marriage, and he kind of questions, his job, covering up for kind of slime balls like Clive Francis. You've also got Keith Barron, who will be kind of familiar to British audiences, probably to his kind of television career. He's another member of the agency who probably has a bit of a crush on Clive Francis. Again, the film is messy. There's lots of scenes that kind of go on too long. John Krish was mainly a documentary filmmaker, and as usual with Indicator, one of the great things about this, it has two more of John Krish's documentaries, which I'll get to at some point. Viewers familiar with the channel, I did a random review of John Krish's Captured, which was about British soldiers being brainwashed during the Korean War, which is fantastic. And this BFI release also has a few of his classic documentary and public information films. It's got The Sewing Machine from 1973, which is a minute long, which is a road safety film, which is just a classic, about a little girl being run over. Searching from 1974, which is a minute, which is a wonderful fire safety scary film. HMP from 1976, which is 55 minutes, which is a compelling and humane recruitment film made for the prison services. That's an absolute cracker. And the best out of the bunch is The Finishing Line, John Krish from 1977, 21 minutes, which is a public safety film to discourage children from trespassing on the railway, but it's filmed as a school sports day. So they have these sports events involving running across train tracks and running into the tunnel. I mean, it's absolutely horrific, and it's amazing he got it made, but that one's almost the price of purchase. You can pick this up really cheaply, and I would highly recommend it because it's absolutely fantastic. And then there's also an interview with John Krish from 2013, which is 35 minutes long. He did die in 2016, so I would highly recommend this one. And also this one, again, perhaps not for as much for the film, even though, again, because Rod Taylor isn't the greatest person in the world, and most of the other people aren't that likeable either, but there is something compelling about watching these characters, and you do feel something for Carol White. Plus, being a Valerie Leon completist, even though she's underused as usual. But again, with Indicator, the extras on this are really good. There's a BEHP audio interview with John Krish, 2 parts, one recorded in 1994, one in 2004, which is 90 minutes long, which is a career-spanning conversation with Rodney Geisler, which is fantastic. A Bad Marriage from 2024, which is 11 minutes. Screenwriter Alan Scott discusses the process of adapting The Man Who Had Power Over Women from the book with writing partner Chris Bryant, and the reasons for removing their names from the final film. So they had more kind of satirical comedy in the film, and they had fallen out with John Krish because he wanted to take that out, but he was just kind of listening to the American producers because it was a English-American co-production. And if you actually look up the credits of Alan Scott and Chris Bryant. It's pretty impressive as well. They wrote the script for Don't Look Now, amongst a ton of other things. But again, as I said, this is 2 more John Krish documentaries, which are awesome. So you've got Break-In from 1956, which is 44 minutes. So this is a dramatised training film for the military police, made for the British Army, and how to investigate crimes. And it actually features Carry On star Jim Dale. Now, it is a little bit difficult to take him seriously because he's Jim Dale and he's all your childhood Carry On films. That's his earliest known screen appearance. I think he was 21 at the time. And it also has, I was going to say Wilford Brimley from The Thing, but it's not. It's Steptoe, Wilford Bramble from Steptoe, in it as well. But then the even better one is Let My People Go from 1961, which is a 24-minute look at apartheid, strange enough in South Africa, and about the Sharpsville massacre, where I think 68 people were shot in the back by government forces, which is absolutely brutal and doesn't sugarcoat anything, very much like his safety video about kids on railways, but this is apartheid, so that's absolutely brutal but also wonderful. And then the booklet contains a new essay by Vic Pratt, interviews with Rod Taylor and John Krish, new writing on Break-In, and Patrick Russell and Let My People Go. So it's another typical Indicator film, and if you've watched this channel enough, you know what that means. Again, not an amazing film, but a fascinating one. And again, any chance for me to get any more John Krish documentaries, you have to jump at that, because if you've seen this release, it's pretty remarkable stuff. So thanks very much for watching this random review of The Man Who Had Power Over Women. Again, it's a terrible title that doesn't really equate to anything. Yes, he has. He gets to know some women in the biblical sense a couple of times, but there's no hypnosis or anything like that. He doesn't have a magic ring that women fall under his spell or anything like that. He's just Rod Taylor. So thanks so much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen The Man Who Had Power Over Women and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. Sorry, I did forget to add that in the documentary about South Africa, Let My People Go, there's this bizarre but pretty sad scene involving Patrick McGee, not Patrick McNee, Patrick McGee as a white South African who is being investigated because he might have coloured blood in his ancestry and therefore would be counted as coloured and would then have to move out of the city because he has coloured blood in his history. Patrick McGee's fantastic in the scene, and lets rip on these two rather nasty officials. So sorry for forgetting that and then remembering it. But you get to see Wilford Bramble, Jim Dale and Patrick McGee in things you probably wouldn't expect to see them in. So thanks so much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell again.